Next witness.
My name is Valita Oden, and I'm from St. Mary's Center, Hope and Justice. I worked all of my life. I raised 3 children. I'm married. My mother was a very happy woman with her daughter. Married, had the children, educated, having, job and everything, until I got hurt on the job. And through a nasty divorce, I had to take care of children alone. And after that, well, all my children went to college, and they are 5 of them are college educated. Kudos. But their mother is in a situation of disability because she got hurt on her job. So, most families, the children kind of help out. Well, that's good if they do, and then you know how it is. This is America still. Everybody have the freedom to do whatever it is. But I'm just asking, will you please restore the money? Poverty is something that no one should have to live through. We've been living through it a long time in this country as Black Americans, but at the same time, here we're faced with another issue. Poverty, again, with Social Security money that I work for. I'm not asking for welfare. I'm not asking for anything else. I just want my money back if I can. So, please, I encourage you to please restore the money. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness, 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon. Pete Wywoody with the California Partnership and the Health and Human Services Network. You folks have heard from many of our members today. Got about 100 people in the Capitol advocating for SSI, and you'll hear more about Maximum Family Grant and CalWorks, et cetera. I just wanted to reemphasize the point that we know that the money is there. We thank you, Chairwoman Mitchell, for your leadership and for calling this issue out and many others. We know that the money is there. Let's take every dollar that we're putting further into the prison system and put it into the lives of the people you have heard from today. Let's take the billions of dollars of difference between the estimate that the Department of Finance puts out every year versus what the LAO actually finds to be accurate. Let's put that money into the hands of the folks you see before you. That'll go into the local economy. That'll get us out of this devastating reality of being the #1 state in poverty in the country and get us towards being the #1 state where everyone can thrive. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next witness. Final word.
John Joseph, AARP, California. I'd just like to sum up, go back in history. When the state has a recession, what happens? Everybody gets hit, but primarily what's gone on here, and I think the most important word in what you're looking at today is the word restoration. This is all money that has been taken. Specifically in SSI, SSP, the lineup here represents poverty in California, that 25% of people that are living below that line. So on behalf of our 3 million members in California, we're in strong support for restoration of the funding, particularly in the COLA and with SSI, SSP. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of the members of the public who took the time to travel, Mr. Harold, Ms. Barajas, for your testimony on this critical issue of the COLA and the SSI, SSP program. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to we're going to leave this item open, members, for further discussion and consideration post-May revise. Thank you. We'll move on to page 11 of the agenda, remaining with the Department of Social Services, and now we'll move into IHSS, In-Home Supportive Services. The first section will be overview from the department, LAO and finance, and then we'll have a second panel representing the provider and recipient community. Director?
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. Eileen Carroll will do sort of an overview on the program data, including participation and overall budget costs. And I will present on the FLSA changes that are involved.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a PowerPoint that I'm hoping you all have been presented with. It's an overview of the program, but I was planning to, the sergeants have a copy of it. Yes. So that gives you a much broader span of the information in IHSS. I'm going to make it succinct and do a brief overview.
Great.
So the IHSS program was created in 1973 to enable eligible elderly, blind, and disabled individuals to live safely and independently in the community. IHSS provides an alternative to out-of-home care. It provides roughly options of almost 26 different services for individuals. We currently, our budget in this program is currently for 14-15 is $7.2 billion, 6.4% increase over the 2013 budget. In 15-16, our budget is approximately $8.2 billion, which reflects a 14.4% increase over the revised 14-15 level. Our caseload in 14-15 was 453,000 individuals, which is a 1.2% increase. In 15-16, it's 463,000, with a 0.3% increase to the 2004 projected budget. The caseload trends on average monthly caseloads, we're looking in 14-15 with an increase at 3.8%, and in 15-16, a 3.7%. The governor's budget has called for the restoration of a 7% reduction for IHSS hours. Those costs are approximately $483 million in 215 general fund. Currently, the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standard Act, those activities are halted due to the court orders that occurred in December and then on January 14th when they issued a complete vacation of the rules. The cost estimated for the FLSA was approximately $403 million or $186 million in general fund.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. And just to elaborate a little bit on the Fair Labor Standards Act component of the program. As you know, in 2013, the Department of Labor issued a regulation essentially repealing the companionship exemption that had existed for most areas of home care services, and particularly in Medicaid-funded public home care programs. California's home care program is far the biggest in the country. The administration had very clearly made our position to the federal government, to the Department of Labor, that that the creation of the new rule would have significant effects to our program. Our program is a self-directed program. That is, the consumer hires, fires, supervises their participant. The state is considered a third-party employer because of our role in financing the program, and because through the public authorities at the county level, we have collective bargaining for IHSS providers. So that creates a third-party obligation. What that effectively does is mean that unlike any other employment situation where, quote unquote, the employer has control over hours that may or may not be worked for overtime, because of the third party and then self-directed characteristics of the program, in a sense, the third party who has the liability does not have control over the assignment of hours, theoretically. And additionally, the points we made to the federal government were 70% of the providers of care in California are relatives. Slightly more than half actually live with their consumer. Therefore, it is not an employment relationship in the typical sense of the word. Our concerns expressed, still the rule was issued. We began scenarios for how to implement, but at the same time control for extreme growth in the cost of the program, extreme use of premium hours. Through the legislative process last year, SB 855 had an implementation provision that created a capping process that would have gone into effect with the implementation January 1, 2015, that would have essentially created work week limits at a maximum of 66 hours per week and less for providers serving consumers who had less than the maximum number of hours authorized. It did not in any way affect the authorized hours for the consumer. It was a control on the actual premium hours cost. As Ms. Carroll said, in December, a district court in Washington, D.C. Issued a stay on aspects of the rule, and then in January of 2015, completely vacated the rule as having been beyond the authority of the Department of Labor. Department of Labor is appealing the district court ruling. The oral arguments are scheduled for May 7th. The Court of Appeals has granted expedited review, which is why it's moving that quickly. We have no clear sense of when an appellate ruling is likely, although it is almost certainly months, not years, is the expectation. As Ms. Carroll said, in the current year, 406 million total funds, 186 million general fund was budgeted for implementation. That's 14-15. And in budget year, 712 million is in the proposed budget, 316 million general fund. Again, the governor's proposed budget was issued prior to the district court vacating the rule. And in terms of the question posed on page 14 of the report, the current year funds remain in the revenue stream, and we expect that the May revision will speak to any further decision-making around how current year funds would be employed. The way that the program is now functioning, since we suspended, or actually stopped implementation based on the court having vacated the rule, is it is exactly the same as it was operating before. No consumer's hours have been reduced, and no consumer has needed to find alternative providers to adjust to any capping of hours. No providers have had any wage loss, and there are no restrictions on the amount of hours that they can work for a single client within authorized hours, or for multiple clients if they have multiple clients.
So it's status quo until the outcome of the appeal is known?
Completely status quo,
okay.
And the wage that is being paid in each county is that wage which was collectively bargained in the last labor agreements that were entered into. So I just wanted to give that as sort of the update on our current status with this.
Any questions? Can I move on to the LAO?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Mark.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
You mentioned, is the court case, what's the status of the court case? Is it complete?
At the district court level, it's complete. And it was not a stay. The judge vacated the Department of Labor's regulation.
And is there any appeal to that decision?
Yes, Department of Labor has appealed, and oral arguments are scheduled for May 7th under expedited review.
Okay, thank you.
The plaintiffs and defendants in the appeal have been submitting written briefs.
Great, thank you. Sorry if I missed that. I just wanted to be clear on possible timetable. Thanks.
Right. And he also said that he didn't think it would be years, it would be expedited, it would be months.
The expectation, I think all parties think that by the end of this calendar year, it will be known. Now, whether it will be further appealed is not known. That the plaintiffs, we are not a party to the suit on either end.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Mark Newton with the LAO. Just a few brief comments on the two big IHSS-related issues that are before the committee, and one is that you've discussed in detail here is the implementation of the Federal Labor Standard Act regulations that are currently been going through the legal process, questioning their enforceability. Just a sort of a technical point, it raises the issue about the funding that's in the current year budget, the 2014-15 budget for that purpose. It's, as the director mentioned, it's roughly $186 million from the general fund. There is language, budget trailer legislation that was passed last year that states that funding appropriated for the implementation of those regulations is to stay within the IHSS budget. Just on a technical note, it's certainly within the legislature's prerogative to direct that funding for whatever purpose it sees, that if it would like it to be used for a specific purpose within the program, within the department, or anywhere else in the state budget, it simply could enact legislation to revert those funds and direct the funding for whatever legislative priority it has. As regards the money that's in the 15-16 budget, which is about $360 million general fund, we would certainly recommend not taking any action, at least until May revision, when we'll know a little bit more about the resolution of the litigation, although it's unlikely it will be resolved fully at that time. A related issue, though, is what's called the CMIPS-2 IT project. That's the Case Management Information and Payrolling Systems that between the 2 years, 14-15 and 15-16, there's about $37 million of total funds that have been allocated to that project, specifically to make conforming changes to the project to implement the new federal regulations that are now sort of in litigation. The agenda notes a number of key questions that we would concur with your asking the department on, sort of the interplay of the CMIPS-2 budget and what happens with the court case. The other big issue that's before you that you've mentioned is this issue of the 7% service reduction and the governor's proposal to restore funding for that service reduction using tax revenues from a restructured managed care organization tax. Just wanted to inform the committee we've done sort of an extensive analysis of the MCO tax proposal in our health budget analysis this year. Just the bottom line conclusion, we think it's a reasonable approach to address the issue. It's consistent with the litigation settlement that really required the state to look at a non-general fund source to restore that funding. So those are sort of the main comments for now. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Newton, I'm going to pose a question to you. I'm going to assume finance may not have the number at their fingertips since it wasn't included in the January budget proposal, but in keeping with your comments with regard to the expectation that current year dollars associated with FLSA would have to remain in IHSS, but recognize that the legislature does have some opportunity to direct those dollars. Do you know the overall price tag of a COLA if one were to be implemented this year?
A COLA for
IHSS.
Senator,
I'm sorry.
Right, because that's bargained locally.
Right. I'm mixing apples and oranges, and so it would have to stay in IHSS. We couldn't use those dollars outside. Never mind.
I guess, Senator, just on that point, that it would be the legislature's prerogative to use those dollars for, yes.
I got it.
Yeah.
Right, but it wouldn't be an IHSS
I had such a bright idea, I got ahead of myself. See, that's what happens when you're spinning too fast. Okay, anything, Senator Monty, Senator Stone? You saw where I was going, but I don't think we can go there, Senator Monty.
But we'll hopefully figure out.
Perhaps we'll have a sidebar on that. Like I said, I got ahead of myself. All right, so let's have the panel come up, please. That will discuss the 7% restoration and the FLSA overtime. Mr. Harris from SEIU, Roxanne Bender, a UDW member from El Dorado County, Greg Thompson, Executive Director of the LA Personal Assistance Services Council, Russell Rollins, IHSS Consumer from the IHSS Coalition, and Ms. Doctor from DRC. Okay, all right. You've got a rogue chairperson up here. Mr. Harris, are you going to start, or do you have another preferred order? You going to start?
I was planning on going somewhere else, but I'll go now. It's perfectly
Well,
fine.
if there's a preferred order of the panel, you let me know.
We hadn't established one, so.
Okay, so I'll just go in the order that's at least on my agenda here, which is Mr. Harris first, Ms. Bender, Greg Thompson, Russell Rollins, and Ms. Doctor will be the close.
So, good afternoon, Chair, members. Robert Harris on behalf of SAIU California and our 250 to 80,000 IHSS workers. I just wanted to set a little context because you'll hear more critical testimony from our members sooner. Just the history of the overtime, so we're clear of the context, is the lack of overtime for IHSS workers was left over from when they first passed the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1939, I believe, and domestic workers were left out of the act in order to get the votes of the Southern Democrats to pass the act. And so it was a carryover of a racist, sexist society, and it stayed that way, and it stayed that way in law. We think that the Department of Labor rectified some of those problems, and we understand that the legislature and the governor came to an agreement last year to pay for that overtime, thinking it was the right thing to do socially and for the program. When the legislation came up, we thought we were under the understanding that it would harm no one. After the enactment of the legislation, we realized there were certain classes of providers and recipients who would be harmed. And we made a strong argument against anybody being harmed. We entered into talks and negotiations with the Disability Rights California and other advocates and the department trying to seek a solution to that. And we were working diligently on that solution until, unfortunately, the court injunction came down and the department said they weren't going to pay the overtime, and we said at that time we had more important things to spend our resources on than solving a problem that wasn't going to come up right then. We're still committed to making sure that people are not harmed by the overtime. A little background on the 7% cut and the tax idea. In 2010, in order to avoid cuts to the program, the legislature enacted extension of the sales tax to IHSS services. And they also enacted a 3.6% cut to the services, and it was the only cut to the services that wasn't litigated. All other cuts in that time frame were litigated and enjoined by the courts. In 2012, we entered into, we being the litigants, being disability rights advocates and the unions, entered into a settlement agreement with the administration. And in that settlement agreement, there was a 4.4% cut added for 1 year for a total of 8%, and then that went away after a year. The 1% went away after a year to a 7% cut. And part of the agreement was that we would work together to seek a solution, a tax-based solution that would restore the 7%. The legislature codified that settlement agreement and made sure in the language that they said that restoring that 7% cut was not contingent upon the enactment of the tax, although we would make every effort possible. The legislature made that a specific decision and put it in the legislation. We then were engaged in several proposals to figure out a tax. One, we went back to the original sales tax that CMS hadn't approved because it wasn't broad enough, and we developed a different model that we thought would be broad enough, and we met with, in fact, with CMS and the administration trying to get guidance on whether that would work, and we thought it would. But it was complicated. Then we decided, then CMS came in and said, look at your MCO tax in California and in all states was done wrong. And so they would have to be rewritten by the end of the next legislative session. And we worked on a model which is the end of 2016. So we worked on a model where the tax could be increased to pay for the IHSS, increase the amount of the tax to pay for the IHSS and buy out the cut over those 2 years. And then we're told, no, that isn't good enough. We want to actually engage in redoing the whole tax right now and make it apply broadly and fix the problem all at once. And so we've been engaged in doing that. But remember, we've been working diligently this whole time to get to a solution that isn't a general fund hit, but restores this cut. We think that the cut's so important to restore that even if we don't find that solution, because the other way that cut's so important is this was the only Medi-Cal cut that was actually a reduction in services to human beings. The rest were cuts and unfair cuts, in my opinion, to providers. But this didn't just cut the providers, this cut the services that people were entitled to get, which they had been determined to need to stay in their house, right? Now, in the meantime, we're going into CCI and we're organizing the care system, and now the plans that are providing the services are getting 7% less services that they would be counting on to keep people out of nursing homes. So restoring this cut helps the CCI work, and it helps the plans, and it helps the recipients who are being robbed of services that they've already being assessed as needed. So with that, I think that we ought to consider just moving forward with restoring the 7%. Regardless, we're still committed to doing whatever it takes to find a funding source, but we think it's so important just in terms of the outcomes in CCI and to the recipients who have been denied these services for all these years, that cut should be restored. I'm sorry I talked so long. Like I said, our members have more important things to say.
No, I appreciate, I'll speak on behalf of Senator Stone. I appreciate you walking us through kind of how we've got to where we are today and the role you all played in your effort to represent your membership. Thank you.